Alrighty, as promised, I got 64 top 8 competitor Andrew Beckstrom here. Welcome back, BK. And we'll be reviewing cube cards. We kind of didn't do one for Bloomburrow, and Bloomburrow was actually a lot less of a windfall for cube, but Duskmourn's got plenty. So we're going to start out with Duskmourn plus Duskmourn Commander, and then we're going to talk about some of the Bloomburrow cards, everything that's fit to cube with. Kicking things off with Metamorphosis Fanatic. So this is from the Commander set, and this one is already in and is already great. Like this I think has no question is going to be a staple. 6 mana for a 4/4 lifelink that puts a creature from your graveyard only, but puts it into play, gives it lifelink, and this has Miracle of 1 and a black. So if you have Brainstorm, Ponder, or are just very lucky, you could really spike with this card.
Yeah, also works with Vampiric effects, Vampiric Tutor, Imperial Seal, so that's pretty sweet. Yeah, the Miracle is definitely the most exciting, but this card just also helps you chain off in a deck where you have a bunch of reanimation targets in your yard. You could sneak attack this one into play and get the card back that you snuck last turn. And
you can always just animate dead this, then get something else, so it's just kind of free.
Yeah, there's always a shortage of cards in black that like really pop with Dark Ritual, and this is another nice addition where you can have a really huge turn with it. So
Crabomination's days might be numbered. We'll see. This card eats its lunch, I will say.
We'll see how much the Miracle text tilts people off.
Yep. So this is Spiked Quarter Torture Pit. So you got to rotate. So Spiked Quarter is 3 in a red. It's a room that when it unlocks, you get 3 1/1 devils that when they die ping anything. And then Torture Pit, if it's unlocked, whenever a source you control would deal non-combat damage to your opponent, it deals +2, which means each devil nugs for 3 directly to their face. It doesn't hit their creatures for 3. I actually missed a kill with this in Pyrokinesis. I'm so mad in my video. I could have just flipped the room, Pyrokinesis 3 devils, they take 9. But I like this card because 4 mana for 3 1/1 devils that ping is pretty good. Like imagine you're playing against White Weenie and you just cast this on like say turn 3 with 1 Accelerant. Might hose a lot of their attacks, and then Torture Pit represents a lot of damage. I never got a chance to test this out, but I'm pretty sure Torture Pit, Fiery Confluence 12s them, because each instance of damage is separate.
That sounds true.
Yeah. So I like this card. I am not as high confidence as Metamorphosis Fanatic, but I think this one is going to stick around.
Yeah, pretty sweet. All of these sort of the red, like, ping lots of things effects like Pyrokinesis and Fury, they go pretty nuts with the Torture Pit. Like your Fury can deal up to 12 damage.
No, it's only to opponents.
Oh, it's only to opponents. Well,
yeah.
I haven't played with it yet. All right, so you'll just use it with your Fire Blasts and your Fire Bolts to really go to the face hard. So, okay.
And then Earthside Monsterosity. So we're going to cover all the commander cards first, then it's by color in Duskmourn. So this is 2 and a green for a 3/3 trample. The beginning of combat on your turn, you mill a card, and then it has stuff about choosing an opponent at random in a 1/1. That doesn't matter. Then this gets indestructible and +1/+1 for each card type among cards in your graveyard. So this is going to attack minimum 4/4 trample when the turn you attack with it. Also, if you cast this before combat, it just mills immediately, so you even get a free mill to start with. And often this is going to attack as like a 6/6 or 7/7 trample, could even be bigger. Plus it's another reason to have self-mill and cards like Tarfire. I know you're into all that. So Earthside Monstrosity looks like actually a really good addition to the pantheon of like green aggressive 3-drops.
Yeah, there's been a lot more graveyard synergies available in green lately, whether it's things like 6 or the Delirium cards. So this looks like a really solid addition that's going to give green some more ways to play besides just like aggressive beatdown or just like mega ramp.
Enduring Innocence. So I've gotten to play a little with this one. It's 1 white for a 2/1 lifelink. When it dies, it comes back as an enchantment, not a creature. So it means that you're going to get the effect of it. The effect of it is whenever 1 or more creatures you control with power 2 or less enter, draw a card, but only once per turn. So if you play this on turn 3, unless they have like an exile effect, they can't get rid of this card. And then next time you play a creature or make a token or anything, you just draw a card. This with like Retrofitter Foundry. I think this card is pretty solid.
Yeah, there's lots of ways in white in particular to make a trigger the same turn you play it, whether it's a Plainswalker that's making a token, cards that are giving you a token when you attack, like
Adeline,
or the Jacked Rabbit. And this just being a 2/1 lifelinker also means it's going to be a pretty nice stabilizing play against red decks, and so you're getting a lot of value from it. It's hard to kill and remove forever. There are a decent amount of those in cube, but for a 3-mana play that's not like beating down super hard, this one I think does enough to get there, and it's cool that we're going to get more cards that are going to let white decks be something other than just curve out aggro.
Yeah, this card I think is good in curve out aggro, but like you said, it actually has applications outside of that. I bet this is a pretty fun one to play. Exercise, this one I think is a little more borderline, but it hits a lot of things. 1 and a white sorcery, it gets an artifact, enchantment, or creature with 4 power or greater. It being a sorcery is obviously not ideal, but I could see cutting like March of Otherworldly Light for this, something like that, to try out just a new kind of removal spell.
Yeah, there's not a ton in the way of white removal for less than 3 mana where you're sort of just getting to kill the lots of types, right? You get lots of plays for 1 mana that can kill creatures, and then 3 which can kind of kill everything. This is sort of in an in-between state, being 2 mana, so time will tell, but there's lots of new artifacts and enchantments like there are with any sets. It generally feels like with modern Magic design, we're getting more and more good cards that sort of incidentally have another one of those types picking up. I mean, we'll be talking about plenty of enchantments getting added to the cube today. So the fact that you get to remove those for just 2 mana is a pretty good deal. Exile is relevant. Like the last card we just looked at, this is a super clean answer to that.
Oh, speaking of which, Overlord of the Mistmoors. This one I've actually had twice so far. I've seen it played. This one's going to stick around. It's 5 white for a 6/6, and when it ETBs or attacks, you make 2 2/1 flyers. That's a lot. And it has Impending 4, which is what makes it interesting. It's 2 white. You basically get to cast this as an enchantment with 4 counters on it, and at the end of your turn, you remove a counter. When the last one's removed, it just becomes a creature. It doesn't get to attack immediately because it removes end of turn, but it will get to attack on your next turn. I also had this plus Time Walk. You can kind of get a surprise attack in. It's got 1 counter left. You Time Walk, and then you just take your extra turn and attack. But honestly, just impending this 4 mana for 2 2/1 flyers that leaves your opponent with a huge problem in 4 turns. That's a pretty reasonable card. If you Flicker Wisp it, this is sick. You can Impending it, then Flicker Wisp it, get 2 more tokens, and now it's a creature. So there's some cool stuff you can do with the Overlords. And to start with, I put all 5 Overlords in.
Yeah, so because it's not a creature right away, when you do the impending cost, you can't blink it with all of the blink effects. Like Ephemerate is a combo when it is a creature, but not until it becomes a creature. But you mentioned Flicker Wisp. It and Felia are 2 of the more notable ones. There's some other cards we could look at down the road at adding.
Can you imagine
cubes.
a turn 2 Felia and then you just like turn 3 this with some acceleration attack and immediately blink it? That sounds like game over.
Yeah, and the other thing that the Overlords are going to do, we'll be seeing more of this cycle, is just another way for your decks to have more high density of big threats that you can dump into the yard and reanimate, but also give you some kind of play that helps you stabilize in the mid game if things aren't going perfectly. The Overlords are overall like a pretty cool, exciting cycle. They've been showing up a lot in constructed formats. I don't think this part of their text shows up in Cube right now, the Enter the Beanstalk kind of thing, but sure. When you impending cost, you are still casting a card of the mana value of the printed card. So if you had a card that cared about a very high mana value,
let's say Mana Drain.
Like Mana Drain, yes. If you Mana Drain this, you're getting 7 mana. That's a great example. Not something you want to have happen to you, but it is something that will come up in Cube. But this is adding more support for sort of expensive spells, matters, cards, which can be cast on the cheap.
Sheltered by Ghosts is interesting. You actually suggested this one. It wasn't on my first list. So it's an Oblivion Ring, hits any non-land permanent, and it gives the creature a +1/+0 lifelink and ward 2. Of course, you're just putting all your eggs in one basket, because if they kill your creature, not only is your creature dead, they also get their thing back. But ward 2, I mean, if you slap this down early, like let's say turn 3, and kill their 2-drop, it's going to be a while before they can kill this sometimes. And even when they do, you got maybe 2 lifelink hits in. Getting a 2-drop back's not a big deal. And of course, if this is unanswered, you can sometimes just run away with the game. Really high upside, but a high risk card. Kind of an interesting one.
Yeah, it stacks well. It has a protective text, but it also stacks well with other protective abilities. Like you put this on a True Name Nemesis, and now you're not getting the ward value, but man, you're talking about 4/1, almost impossible to deal with.
This is sick on True Name. Lifelink on True Name is no joke.
Yeah, and I think just
Mother
when
of
you
Runes,
know that
Giver of Runes, all that too.
when you know the tempo of the game, yeah, it's pretty gnarly with Mother or Giver of Runes, because the nature of Ward is that they'll cast the removal spell onto it. They would have to pay for it, and then you would still get an opportunity to tap.
Only thing to look out for is if they use Swords to Plowshares, you're not going to like the result. You give your creature pro white, the Shelter by Ghosts will fall off and all that. So keep that in mind. But I've kind of liked this one. It is a high payoff, but I mean, when it works, this card is really sick.
Yeah, I really like Fur Cube cards that play lots of different ways, and that's definitely been true of this card in the limited format. Sometimes you're using it in a very aggressive way, sometimes you're sort of using it as your finishing move, where you're both they're out of like removal, you're killing something, and now you've established a big life linking threat. And so for a card which is sort of like a lot of risk, it still gives you a lot of ways to play with it, because you can get well rewarded for waiting a bit before casting it.
Yeah, and sometimes you put it on your weakest creature because you want them to not kill your best creature if something goes wrong. Sometimes you exile like a 4/4 token instead of their slightly better creature, because that way, of course, they don't get it back. A lot of different play to Shelter by Ghosts. I'm excited about this one. Split Up is one I haven't put in yet, but you thought it was worth talking about, so I'll let you do that.
I mean, anytime you're talking about a Wrath that costs less than 4 mana and white, we're already talking about it having some upsides that you're not getting from some of the other cards. Now, the big issue with it is that for spending 1 less mana than a Wrath of God, you're only getting to kill some of the creatures on the board. Against a whole haste deck, it's pretty nice because you get to just kill everything. Everything's tapped. The issue you're going to run into is that it's not going to clean up the board when they just go like threat, attack with everything, follow-up threat, because now we're talking they've got 2 tapped, 1 untapped. So this is a card I think you definitely could consider if you were trying to say you had Day of Judgment and Wrath of God and Damn in your cube, and you were like, I wish one of these cards is played a little bit more differently than the others. Without having played with it, I would guess it's a little too weak, but the fact is it is just 3 mana, and Deluge has done some nice work in that department.
Yeah, and there might be some situations where you can like make an attack, a bluff attack, they don't block, and then you kill all untapped creatures or something. There is some play to it. Toby Beastie Befriender has already convinced me of basically just being a better Blade Splicer. You get a 4/4 instead of a 3/3, and you have the text, as long as you control 4 tokens, creature tokens you control have flying. The drawback is the 4/4 can't attack or block alone, but I haven't found that to be too bad. And they didn't make the token legendary, so you can blink Toby and make a bunch of 4/4s, and that's pretty sick too.
Yeah, I did expect it to be legendary the first time I read it too, because you just like look at it and it's like, well, that thing there looks like it's got a name, but its name is just 4/4 White Beast.
Actually, it's Gribble if you look at the flavor text.
Oh, well, that just seems rude. Then we don't call it Gribble. Yeah, in limited, so far playing with it in the draft format, the 4 more token thing just kind of comes up in longer games, and it's not going to be very hard if you're playing with cards like a Johnny and Adeline, Goblin Rabblemaster, any of these cards which are just pumping out lots of tokens for you. Wow, when you get that turn where you normally would be chump attacking and with those small tokens and now they're flying, it just going to snowball the game out of reach for you.
I want to give some constructs flying with this. This is what I want to do. That's the dream. Unidentified Hover Ships is also a really nice one. 1 white for a 2/2 flying vehicle with crew 1. When it enters, it exiles a creature with toughness 5 or less. Anything too big can't fit in the tractor beam. And when this leaves play, they get to manifest dread. So A, they don't get their thing back. B, if you exile a token, they don't get a manifest. I don't know if you knew that.
I did know that.
That came up for me in limited. Well, actually, it came up for Chian, and he was messaging me like, is this a bug? I killed their hover ship. I didn't get anything back. I'm like, well, what did they exile? And he's like, oh, a token. I'm like, yeah, it has to be a card. And it's also, unlike a lot of the cards you see like this, the fact that it's a vehicle, I think, is much better than if this was just a 2/2 flyer, because against a lot of decks, you can just have this not get killed by leaving it in the like sleeping vehicle mode, and then only crewing it when the opportunity is there to get a good hit in. It survives sweepers. Like, it does some cool stuff. It plays really nicely, and I think it is powerful enough.
You can hit your own stuff. I don't think we mentioned that.
True.
It's not like it's the best or anything, because normally when you were to like Fiend Hunter your own creature, it's like, oh, I get it back with its ETBs. You're just going to get a Manifest Dread. So you might be able to get some good value out of that. It's going to be a little bit more rare in Cube that you have something where it's like, oh, down the road, I'll be able to turn this into a 2/2. I'd rather not have this in play. But it is an option for you, and it is one that you can pick up if you're, playing a best of 3 match. They have sweepers, and you want to try to have more ways to have stuff behind after a sweeper that could also kill your hover ship.
Yeah, which is not that many, but I will say, being a white 3-drop right now, you're at risk. This and Toby are both very strong, as well as the Enduring Innocence. All right, on to blue, we've got a Boret Oculus. So it's 2 and a blue for a 5/5 flying. And at the beginning of their upkeep, you manifest Dread. The catch, of course, is you have to exile 6 cards from your graveyard as an additional cost to cast it. So the idea with this is if you have self-mill, it's good. If you can animate or somehow cheat it into play, it totally works. Obviously, in the limited format, you can try to manifest this, but there's not a ton of manifesting in the cube right now. Do you think there's enough support for this one?
I think so, but it's pretty limited. Like, I think the most common way you're going to want to play with this card is as like a Murktide Regent. And it is less flexible because you can't just spend more mana on that. But it does create so much board presence, and if you have additional graveyard synergies, I would say that's probably the biggest place. Is like if you actually want to have like your cube really support dedicated self-mill graveyard Stitcher Supplier kind of things, Recurring Nightmare, Abhorrent Oculus is a really good fit. It's showing up a lot in Constructed, and anytime we see a card that's just like making waves in Standard, Pioneer showing up in Modern, it seems like we should at least put its paces.
Yeah, I think it. You know, we get to change our cube list whenever we want and fire new drafts every day. So I'm usually casting a wider net to start with. It's pretty easy to tell when cards aren't good enough or are good enough. Yeah, this is actually one I haven't been able to tell yet, though I do like it. It's in right now. It's Enduring Curiosity, 2 blue, 4/3 flash. Whenever one of your creatures deals damage to a player, draw a card. So it's not once per turn either. If you hit them with 3 things, you'll draw 3. And then, of course, when this dies, it comes back as an enchantment. So it's expensive. It's in a color that doesn't necessarily have tons of creatures, but the effect here is really good.
Yeah, we're pretty used to recently getting these sort of curiosity style effects where it's capped out at just one of your creatures hitting. You get a card no matter how many you hit with. This one, if you hit with 3 creatures, you're drawing 3 cards. So the possibility of this card is a lot higher than some recent versions we've seen. The fact that this one is just like, it can come down, just block with a Questing Beast, and now you've got some good material behind. The biggest thing that I would be concerned about with Enduring Curiosity is, 4 mana is a decent amount of mana. And then also, for a card that costs blue, are we going to be able to get enough of a good curve of threats? There are a lot of like flash flyers like Fairy Mastermind and Malcolm that are going to curve well into this. But it's not necessarily going to be what every blue deck wants.
True name stock rising. Rising rapidly. Overlord of the Flood Pits is the blue Overlord, so it's 5 mana for a 5/3 with impending of 1 blue, and when it enters or attacks, you draw 2 and discard 1.
Yeah, not free for you when you're playing any blue deck with graveyard themes to get discard outlets, and in particular, a discard outlet that works through removal spells. You play a Jace Vryn's Prodigy, a Malcolm, a Kitson. Your opponent's got a window where they could just kill the thing before you can discard it. And I think that if you're looking for like a blue play that's going to sustain you through the mid to late game, you can do a little bit better than this in terms of Plainswalkers and other sort of expensive blue instants and sorceries. But the fact that you're getting sort of a good like mid-range game plan with Overlord of the Flood Pits and a discard outlet that you can use for your graveyard synergies makes me curious to try this one.
Yeah, it's a cool card, and I'm obsessed with trying to use the Overlords plus balance. I mean, some of them draw you extra cards or put creatures into play, but like having this big giant thing that you can balance all the creatures away, then have it come in, I think that's pretty cool.
Richard Garfield never understood that people would use enchantments asymmetrically.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Silent Hall Creeper, speaking of cards that are good with Enduring Curiosity, it's one and a blue for a 1/1. It's unblockable, and when it hits them, you get to choose one of these 3, but you have to choose one that hasn't been chosen. It's also not optional. So the way it goes is A, you draw a card. That's almost always the first one. Then you put 2 +1/+1 counters on the Hall Creeper, and then it becomes a copy of another creature you control. So you can do some cool stuff. You won't get the ETB effects or anything, but like attacking with a 3/3 Hall Creeper, turning it into even just like a 4/4 that's now a 6/6 is pretty good. And the starting baseline of 2 mana, 1 unblockable, and hits them draw a card is really nice.
You hit them and turn it into an Ajani that you just played, and now you get to flip your Ajani immediately.
Yeah, it's a combo that works. But I've liked the Hall Creeper. This has felt a lot better than all the previous like Looter Ilkor type slots, which really got eliminated. The last one in was the Suspicious Stowaway, but I think the 2/1 flash creatures kind of booted that out. I think Hall Creeper is good enough to maybe reclaim its spot. This is a speculative one. Unable to Scream. We call it the Blue Swords to Plowshares, so Why not? It makes the creature an O2 with no abilities. That actually is pretty good at removing it. I mean, if your opponent plays Eternal and Ragavan or Mother of Runes and you cast this card, you're going to be happy with the result.
Yeah, the scariest thing with this card is that people are going to have removal in some of the colors that are going to just be able to remove this, and they immediately get to use their big creature for whatever was intended for. But when we were talking about this before we started this stream, the point that I kind of made was that we've seen other cards like this that haven't gotten there, but we've never seen a card this good that does this. Like, 1 mana, remove all abilities, and shrink all of the stats down to literally can't even like hit for damage. It can if it has like +1/+1 counter, so watch out for that. But that is about as good as it gets from what we've seen. And in a color which oftentimes is looking to need to add another color to get this kind of effect, this is something where it's not going to be the best removal spell in the cube, but it is going to be the best removal spell that's for something that's already on the board that blue can get.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I was playing like, especially like blue-green or blue-white or something, would I cut this card from my deck? And I feel like I wouldn't cut it from my deck that often if I was like a blue control deck. But
yeah, a blue-green deck is a great example where you're just like, I just want to ramp and do something big at some point in the game. And my God, being able to actually deal with a threat for 1 mana that isn't just like bouncing or something very temporary, I really enjoy it.
Yeah, we'll try this one out. We'll see how it goes. Nowhere to run. It's in. It's solid. 1 and a black. It's flash. Enchantment. When it ETBs, a creature your opponent controls gets -3/-3 till end turn, and it ignores ward and hexproof. Like, their hexproof things can be targeted. Their ward abilities don't trigger. And this is kind of cool because it still can't kill True Name Nemesis, because that's different. But it's kind of neat to be able to get around some of the protection effects that people might be relying on. Like, having this in play, you get to kill their Kappa Cannoneer with Embereth Shieldbreaker for 1 mana. Those kind of plays sound fun to me. And 2 mana -3/-3 with leaving something behind, that's plausible. There's not like tons of ways to use an enchantment lying around, but there's not zero. So
Flicker Wisp, Felia, Teferi Time Raveler.
Yeah, those are all legit reasons. And I think Nowhere to Run, it was easy to cut one of the kind of generic removal spells to try it out. We don't necessarily need Infernal Grasp every single time. So this is the Black Overlord, 5 mana, 5/5 with impending of 1 and a black, but impending 5. So it's cheaper and longer. So it comes out around the same time, but you get to play it earlier. And when it enters or attacks you, mill 4 cards, then you return a creature or planeswalker from your graveyard to your hand. You can't return avatars, so you can't like loop these. But basically, this I think is the weakest Overlord. The blue one maybe is close. You're not always going to have something to get, but this is that self-mill you were looking for. I think that you'd be pretty much in for this one. And also, it is pretty cheap at 5 mana. 5 mana, 5/5, get something back immediately. That's pretty decent. So I've liked the Overlord of the Baelmerk.
Yeah, very excited to have this card in my Barrow decks. Having multiple types for Delirium purposes. And Enchantment is one of the harder ones to get into the yard. This card just does a lot and like gives you both a cheap way to play with it and a way where in the mid game, when you're both in top deck wars, this will very quickly pull you ahead because you're going to get something back immediately. And if it survives and makes another attack, the game's just over for sure. Yeah,
very interested in the Overlord of the Baelmerk. So this is an Unholy Annex Ritual Chamber. Here I can kind of rotate it. Okay. So basically, the enchantment for 2 and a black is at the beginning of your end step, draw a card. If you control a demon, they lose 2 life, you gain 2 life. Otherwise, you just lose 2 life. So by itself, this is a 2-life Phyrexian Arena that triggers on your end step, so you get the card right away. But the other half is 5 mana, 3 black, and you make a 6/6 demon. Of course, the joke is when you have the demon out, the Unholy Annex actually is awesome for you. It drains them for 2 and draws a card. This card also been making waves in Constructed. I have to imagine it's worth trying.
Yeah, it's a Phyrexian Arena that you get the card back on your end step is a big jump in terms of how much reliable value you're getting out of the card. The biggest risk, of course, is all the life loss, so it might be something that some decks are just going to bring in out of their sideboard. But if you can get any other demons in, there's no Mutavault in the cube right now, but that's an interaction that's been showing up a lot in Constructed where you just activate your Mutavault, even if you're not attacking with it, just to get an extra drain out of them.
Sure. Kind of a cool card. This one's been making waves in Constructed too. Unstoppable Slasher, 2 and a black for a 2/3 death touch. If it hits them, they lose half their life. So Can't really ignore it, and if it dies, it comes back with 2 stun counters on it tapped. And then if it dies while it's got stun counters on it, it doesn't come back. But this is like kind of effectively a 10 power creature, so again, they can't really ignore it. And almost always will trade for at least 1 card and then probably a second. Very cheap. You can sacrifice it for things. It's just a very sweet card.
Yeah, it's been impressive how well this card plays both offense and defense. You're getting beaten down, and you just play this, and now they have to probably throw something away into it, and you'll have it back blocking again in a couple of turns. Or you just play it on turn 3 if you're on offense, and now they have to use a removal spell on something that's going to really pressure their life total. It'll come back, or it'll just take a huge chunk of damage. There's some interesting plays that come up with this card. So it's not just if it has a stun counter when you kill it, it will not come back. It's if you have any counter on it. So that could mean finality counters. That could mean you put a +1/+1 counter on it from one of your own cards. If it lets you put it on anything, just put it on the Unstoppable Slasher, and then once you kill it, it'll die for good because it had a counter on it.
Yeah, a finality counter would stop the ability for multiple reasons, but yes. It's a reason not to put a +1/+1 counter out with like the Wandering Emperor if you don't need to, because it does make the card a little worse. But great card. I have to imagine this one will be staying around. Valgavoth I'm less sure about. So this is 6 black for a 9/9 flying lifelink, ward sack 3 non-land permanents. It exiles all the cards that would go to their graveyard and lets you cast them by paying life. So obviously this is a reanimate card. How good is it at reanimating? I don't know. It's if you sneak or shallow grave it, often you're just hitting them for 9 lifelink, which is okay, but is not good enough to go through the whole rigmarole. Like you want a turn 3, shallow grave to put some lasting value into play, and this really doesn't. But if you put it into play with a permanent effect, like an Animate Dead, this is pretty hard to kill.
Yep, the sacrifice 3 non-land permanents takes a lot out of people. The combo that you can do if you're sneaking or shallow graving it is that if you pair it with another removal spell, you can kill something, and then since it's your turn, you get the ability to pay for it using the pay life mode of Valgavoth. And since you got a 9/9 lifelink, you could probably do that. There's a lot of expensive. There's a lot of real estate in the cube for these kinds of cards and a lot of competition. So we'll see how it shakes out, but it's certainly a little bit different, and it's got some cool upsides that some of the other ones don't.
Yeah, it's pretty good against Karakas, unlike most of the legends. They have to pay the ward cost to use it.
True.
Chainsaw, I love this one. Warren a red, it's an artifact, it's equipment. When it ETBs, it deals 3 damage to up to 1 creature. When a creature dies, put a counter on this, or 1/1 or more, so it's limited if like a Wrath happened, there's only be 1. And equipped creature gets +X+O or X the number of rev counters on it with equipped 3. So the way this plays, it's a sorcery speed removal spell, but then it gets 1 counter. And as things happen, usually the chainsaw just kind of sits there. And then once it gets to like 3 or 4 counters, it starts becoming worth it to equip it. But once you do, it just keeps growing because let's say you equip this on a 1/1 with 4 counters on it. Now it's a 5/1. Are they going to take 5? Probably not. They're going to either kill the thing or trade, in which case it just keeps accumulating counters. And I've seen chainsaws with 10 counters out, in which case every creature's lethal. Plus, if you can bounce it, it's sweet. I want to make a red Academy deck because there's 3 good red artifacts that we're going to be adding in this drop. So Chainsaw's been nice.
Obligatory Stoneforge Mystic mention.
Ooh, I didn't even think about that, but yeah.
So we've had for a little bit now this ability in blue-white with the Aegis for Stoneforge Mystic to get a removal spell, but now the Boros decks can join in on the fun.
Well, I actually cut the Aegis. I didn't think it was good enough, but
well, there's times where I got it and it was good for me.
Yeah, well, Chainsaw's in. I think Chainsaw is great. I don't know about the monkey yet, but
Monkey.
1 mana, 1/1 artifact creature. So it's got 2 types. It's got haste, and when it dies, you exile the top card, and you have until the end of your next turn to play it. This card is awesome in draft. I think that it's a reasonable thing to consider, especially as this artifact subtype. I'm not sure if there's quite enough support for it, but let me tell you, I've skull clamped this one, and it is nice to do that.
Yep. This you always got to pay attention to the details with the exile the top card of your deck. This is the generous timing where you're going to get it for both right now and through the end of your next turn. So you could hit something expensive and you still got some time to get the mana for it. So the card does some nice work, has a bunch of types. Monkey and toy, not super relevant, but artifact sure is.
We've got FOMO, Fear of Missing Out, another multi-typed card. So 1 in a red for a 2/3 enchantment creature. When it enters, you can rummage, discard a card, and draw a card. It's actually not optional. You have to rummage. And then it has Delirium.
It's better than rummage, though. It's discard a card and then draw a card.
If you're empty-handed, yeah.
Yeah. you get a card.
You get a free card, so that's a good point. And it has Delirium. If you have Delirium when this attacks, you get to untap target creature and have an additional combat phase this turn, and it only happens the first time you attack. So basically, it's like reasonably statted creature that gets you a little card selection, and at some point in the game, it threatens a nice double attack, either with itself or something else. You can like throw this away to make your 5/5 flyer attack twice. If you've got like a creature with an attack trigger, it's obviously very strong to do that. Glorybringer. Though actually, if you can't exert it the first time and then use FOMO, because then I think it'll knock the stun counter off of the Glorybringer, but it won't actually untap it, I think is correct. Or maybe exert's old. It's not a stun counter. Yeah, it's just your next untap.
Right.
Oh yeah, so this actually works really well with Glorybringer because that clears the way for both of these things to get in. I think it's a solid red aggressive card. It's been good so far.
Yeah, there's some neat combos with this card, like you've already mentioned. The other one to shout out is Fable the Mirror Breaker, and then we'll be talking about another new card, the Jolly Balloon Man. If you have a card that can be making copies as like a tap activated ability of FOMO, you attack, you untap the thing that makes a clone, and then you make another copy of FOMO. Since the new copy of FOMO won't be restricted by being the first time, because for that creature, it is the first time. So with Reflections of Kiki Jiki, it's just like 1 mana, deal an extra 2 damage, repeatable, assuming they're all going to get through.
It doesn't work that way with Balloon Man because it's a sorcery ability, so there's no window to like... You can untap Balloon Man, but then it's just your combat phase again. There's no way to go.
Good call.
Though with Balloon Man, you can just make a second FOMO, attack with both, untap 2 things, and like have a pretty big attack. Reflection works exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, FOMO's been cool. Red has gotten some nice cheap upgrades. I like that. The lower part of the curve. And here's the upper part of the curve. Overlord of the Boiler Bilges. So it's 4 red for a 5/5 with impending 4 of 2 red. And its ability is to deal 4 to any target, including your opponent. So, pretty solid card. I'm not 100% sure this one's going to stick around, but 4 mana to deal 4, and then in a few turns you get a 5/5, or just you cast it for 6 mana. I think it's better than Inferno Titan, but Inferno Titan's not in right now, so that isn't necessarily the bar it needs to clear.
Yeah, dealing 4 damage is at least a mark that a lot of red cards don't hit. There's plenty of ways to pick up a cheap red instant or sorcerer that can deal 3, so then X4s are a little bit more prized. So this one, while a good bit more expensive, at least kills something that some of the cheap ones don't. And
it's some more face burn. Like things that go to the face, you definitely like. They like having the critical mass in order to finish things off. Piggy Bank is another artifact. It's 1 red for a 3/2 artifact creature, and when it dies, you make a treasure. Another artifact. Any Delirium Academy enjoyers?
Yeah, this card is like a bit of a moat in the early game because your opponent's not going to know exactly how scary it is for them to just attack the random 2/2 or 2/3 into this thing. And then you might be able to make really good use of the treasure. Being an artifact, obviously we're big fans of that around here. So we'll see. The fact that it doesn't like provide any like immediate pressure beyond just having 3 power is a bit of a strike against it. But the card does a few things that are nice.
Razorkin Needlehead is red for a 2/2. It's got first strike during your turn. Some might call that quick draw. And whenever your opponent draws a card, it pings them for 1. I have this in right now. I'm a little skeptical. Red is just really restrictive. It's a reward for the mono red players, I guess. But if this cost 1 red, I'd be a lot happier with it. It just, some amount of the time, you're just not going to be able to cast this on turn 2 is my main issue.
Well, I mean, if you just go by simple math, like it costs half as much as Shieldred and it deals half as much damage, and Shieldred's really good. So if you're getting half of it for half the price, that's as good.
Yeah, but you're not getting half because you don't get any life.
That's true. And also, like, 1 damage stacks a lot slower than 2 damage.
Yeah, so this one's okay. Definitely plausible, but I'm not high confidence of it. I like Screaming Nemesis, though. 2 and a red for a 3/3 haste. So when it's dealt damage, it deals them that much damage to any target. So, like, if you attack this into a 3/3, and then you can kill their other 3/3. And if you choose to hit them with the trigger, they can't gain life the rest of the game.
And there's fun plays you can make with this thing. If you get into if you want to, like say you're just playing like a Pyrokinesis or a Fury, you could just have some of the damage get dealt to Screaming Nemesis and then ping your opponent's face. And now you're finding a way to convert some of that Fury damage into actually like hitting them and you turning off their lifelink. If you want to go farther down the route of like making this card crazy in your cube, yeah, play it with Star of Extinction and Blasphemous Act, and you can one-shot people.
Yeah, that is funny. I think it just looks like a good aggressive red creature that also is good against creature decks. Not all of the threats are. Whereas like Rabblemaster, for example, is beating against a creatureless deck, but against like a green deck sometimes can't really do as much. This card looks pretty good even if they have like a 4/4 or a 5/5.
And to be clear, this card is a good time against Goblin Rabblemaster.
Oh, also true. Also true. Enduring Vitality. This is one of the green enduring creatures, so it comes back as an enchantment. It's 1 green. It's a 3/3 Vigilance, and your creatures have tap, add 1 mana of any color. So kind of a cool card to reward going wide, token making, Gaia's Cradle style decks. And also, it's a 3 mana 3/3 that dies into value, which is kind of nice. So far, this card has been getting played. I'm not sure how good it is yet, though.
Yeah, this is probably the weakest effect of any of the enduring cards that we've seen in terms of what you get went afterwards, because it's pretty easy in games for you to just kill this. It doesn't still have the ability itself to tap for mana because it's creatures you control and it's no longer a creature at that point. The upside's pretty high. You're going to, we've had plenty of decks where it's like, we're a mono away splashing like an Arwen and a Gaia's Cradle. This card asks a little bit more for you if you're trying to take advantage of some of the token making in other colors and adding that sort of Gaia's Cradle effect where you're going to need to actually have green to get this going. But when you do in your Academy deck or your mono white deck, it's going to be really potent with some of the cards we like to play like Retrofit or Foundry.
Yeah, that is cool. I haven't used this with like Saheeli yet, for example, but it sounds like it could go pretty hard. Omnivorous Flytrap, so this is more of the Delirium theme. It's 2 and a green for a 2/4, and if you have Delirium, when it enters or attacks, you get to distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among your creatures, and if there are 6 or more card types, you then double the number of +1/+1 counters on those creatures. So what will commonly happen is you'll play this with Delirium, put 2 counters like 1 and 1, let's say, and then by the time you attack next turn, if this is still around, you maybe have 6 types, and then you get to go 1/1, double them both. You ended up getting 8 counters out of the triggers, plus you got a 2/4, can target itself as well if you need to make it survive combat. So is there enough support for this? That's, I guess, what we're going to try to find out.
Yeah, the real like big wombo combo you can get with this card is that if you have a haste granting effect like an Arena of Glory,
oh yeah,
and you have the 6 or more card types, you're talking about just a comical amount of damage because you're getting to put 2, double that up to 4, then you're getting to put 2, you're doubling it up to now we're at like
this would hit for 14, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot. So you'll see. Also works with cards like Bristly Bill. There's a few like counters matters cards in the cube that play well with this.
The green Overlord is 5 mana for a 6/5. Its impending cost is only 1 green and impending 4. And what you get is you get a tapped colorless land that's every basic land type. Pretty cool card. It's a ramp spell. It ramps an actual land into play for you that you don't have to put in your deck, which is kind of nice. It's a token land. I think that's the first time I've seen that, or at least I haven't seen it very often. Though I guess we made a bunch of Raging Ravines the other day.
We did. Yeah, not too much token land generation.
And it's a 6/5, so this one, I mean, again, it's good with all the blink effects, and it's pretty big. It's going to get you some value. 3 mana for a ramp spell, especially at double green, is not the easiest, but I could definitely see this being a part of heavy green decks.
Yeah, it sounds okay there. The other place I want to shout it out is for domain decks.
Oh, yeah.
Unlike some cowards, we include Sign of Draco in our
Oh,
cubes.
I do like the Sign of Draco.
It is very nice with the everywhere because it just immediately drops down to you have all 5 types. It's not like it only counts for 1 or something. It's just you have it.
And then Tyvar the Pummeler is another one. So it's 1 green for a 3/3. You can tap another creature to give Tyvar indestructible and tap it. And you can pay 3 green to give all your creatures +X, where X is the greatest power among your creatures. So I guess the idea here is you play this, you have another creature untapped, so it's pretty hard to kill. Some decks might not even be able to, red or black, for example. And then you have this like kind of powerful overrun effect. You would need a lot of creatures for this to be good, but it does support that.
Yep, nice thing about the 2 abilities, hey, they're both good with having cheap creatures around, and the fact that this card is such a nice blocker for you in the mid game is great for a green deck, which is oftentimes looking to set up, playing some mana ramp, trying to get a big board going, and the fact that you can like interact with opposing attackers with something that's not going to die is pretty valuable for you.
This with that the bear mutant, You get to pay the 5 mana and give all your creatures like +7/+7. Sounds pretty sick off just 2/3 drops. So interesting to see if Tyvar and some of these other cards can push green to be more aggressive. Under the Skin. This is one I initially would not have put in, but after playing with it a bunch in draft, it's a pretty powerful card. I mean, compared to Eternal Witness, you get a 2/2 and you get a card back, though you can only get permanence back, but it also gives you a little more selection because it manifests, and sometimes the manifest is an actual creature. Like if you manifest an Overlord and then next turn flip it and attack with it, like that is pretty strong. So I'm curious about Under the Skin. My guess is we won't want to cut Witness for it, but we did want to talk about it.
Yeah, the best thing going for it is that it just does a lot in terms of setting you up for Delirium, helping you dig for whatever key creature you want. And so you're getting some more bonuses at the cost of being a little bit more restrictive about being able to get back Innocence and Sorceries.
Valgavoth's Onslaught. This is in. People are playing with it. I haven't seen it pop off, though I had it in an Academy deck and I never had that come together. I ended up cutting the Onslaught, sadly. But for XX green, you get to manifest X times and then put X counters on each of those creatures. So for 3 mana, you get a 3/3. For 5 mana, you get 2 4/4s. And for 7 mana, you get 3 5/5s. And then it continues to go up from there. How do you feel about this as like a scalable, kind of spell that like is kind of bad on 3, but pretty decent on 5 and gets really good at 7 or 9?
Yeah, I'm excited to try it out, partially because this card has the potential to scale well in more powerful formats. You play it in limited and it's like, how often when you manifest Dread do you do better underneath it than just like another random like 2/2 with maybe a small amount of text? Well, in Cube, if you're playing with a green deck with a lot of really good creatures, you're going to be putting things underneath it like Sentinel of the Nameless City, Questing Beast, Uvenwald Oddity. And if you are flipping those up with a bunch of counters on them, well, those cards can have some big impacts on the game. So I like that part of the card, and the fact that in Cube, you always want to be. The games are fast and brutal, and being able to just play it as a 3 mana 3/3 or 5 mana get 2 4/4s might be exactly what you need to stabilize the game.
Yeah, I'm really interested in seeing how good that card is. So this is Walk-in Closet / Forgotten Cellar. So it's 2 and a green for a Crucible of Worlds. Straight up, you just play lands from your graveyard. And then Forgotten Cellar is when you unlock it, you get a Yawgmoth's Will this turn. You can cast spells from your graveyard, and if a card will be put into your graveyard from anywhere, exile it. So the question is it worth cutting Crucible? How often is Crucible in non-green decks? Not that often. And having a Yawgmoth's Will side of a Crucible seems like additional value. I am interested in making that swap. Though it's also possible I could just cut Ramanov Excavator, though I like the Green Suns aspect of that. I don't think we'd want all 3. What do you think?
Yeah, I would probably start it over Crucible in the beginning. Like you said, your Crucible deck's almost always green because you get other redundancy in terms of Lands Matters cards there. So I don't anticipate playing it as a bad Yawgmoth's Will, but I anticipate you doing that.
Well, I don't mean to play it for the Yawgmoth Will part. I would only put it in decks that wanted the Crucible, but having your Crucible when you have infinite mana with fast spawn turn into Yawgmoth's Will?
I anticipate you playing it for Yawgmoth's Will.
Yeah, sounds pretty good. The Jolly Balloon Man is 1 red-white for a 1/4 haste, and you can pay 1 and tap it and create a token of another target creature you control. And note, it doesn't say legendary. I ran into that as Eomatic copied a Johnny and just completely destroyed me.
That story was even better the second time.
Yeah, and then it becomes a red balloon creature, and it only activates as a sorcery, just so you know.
I also remember making that mistake earlier in this conversation. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. The fact is, you just there's not a lot of cards that do this. There's no Kiki in the Cube right now. You got to wait a while for Fable, and so once you find some cards that are just good, if you have multiples of them in play, and yeah, there was a lot of those in the Cube. You get their ETBs, you get their attacks, and you're going to get their connect abilities a lot if they're triggering off that, because you're getting flying and haste.
Little flying balloon dude. Yeah, Jolly Balloon Man's interesting. I'm excited to play with it. Kaito I'm skeptical of. I'm not sure if we're going to add this one or not. It's 2 blue-black for a 4 loyalty Plainswalker. It's got ninjutsu. So this is the kind of cool part. For 1 blue-black, if you have an unblocked attacker, you can put Kaito in instead, because during your turn, Kaito is a 3/4 ninja creature with hexproof. And its +1 is you have an emblem with ninjas you control of +1/+1. Yeah, that's not so great. Pumps Kaito almost only.
Do we have any ninjas in the Cube right now?
Fallen Shinobi.
Yeah.
0 is Surveil 2, and then draw a card if your opponent lost life this turn. And then -2 is tap target creature and put 2 stun counters on it. So I'm not sure what you would want to have going on for this card to be good. I'm not really seeing it.
Yeah, it's weird. This plays a little bit more like a Gideon than some of the other like blue-black Plainswalkers we've seen, where it's just sort of very passively drawn cards. So I think blue-black like aggro is at a little bit lower, but there's some good cards that can beat down in this set, like we've seen like Silent Hill Creeper. So it does just hit hard, and if you've got like a Deep Cavern Bat, it's pretty easy to set up the ninjutsu, but it might just not do enough, even though you're getting a Plainswalker for 3.
Yeah, I don't think we're quite there. So this is Roaring Furnace, Steaming Sauna. 1 in a red. When you unlock it, it deals damage equal to the number of cards in your hand to target creature an opponent controls. So it's a 2-mana removal spell most of the time. And then the Steaming Sauna is 3 blue, and it says, beginning of your end step, draw a card. Also, you have no max hand size, though I haven't really even seen that part come up. So the question is a removal spell that's also a card draw engine good enough? Neither half is good enough by itself, but of course getting both is a pretty big benefit. I'm not sure about this one. Eli Cassis played this against me, and he never actually cast it, so I don't know if it was good. But it was in his deck. Someone played with it. I'm not sure. What do you think?
Yeah, I had it in a sealed deck the other day, and it was like the 5-mana like Howling Mine mode was like almost a little too slow there. So I feel like you really want this card for the fact that you're getting a red sort of deal a bunch of damage, and then you might get some more upside. I don't know that you're ever going to get enough out of this card, but it's cool. I like Is It cards are always fun to try out because they let you play with all the cards that we grew up playing with.
Yeah. So we'll see on this, the Roaring Furnace. Love the Swarm Weaver. 2 green-black for a 2/3 artifact creature. When it ETBs, you get 2 1/1 black and green flying insects. And as long as you have Delirium, the Swarm Weaver is going to give all of your insects and spiders +1/+1 and Death Touch. So the other 2 insects it makes are 2/2 Death Touchers. It itself is only a Scarecrow. It doesn't pump itself. 4 mana for a 2/3 +2 1/1 flyers that sometimes are 2/2 Death Touch flyers. I like that. It's a good card to recur. Recurring Nightmare and this card are definitely friends.
Grist also makes insects, so watch out for that.
And fuels Delirium nicely, too.
Mm-hmm. Does it? Or is it just a creature?
Well, no, Grist +1 fuels Delirium
Yes,
nicely.
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Swarm Weaver gives you a lot of stats and bodies, so Jund is probably going to be the most common place you're going to be looking for a Delirium sort of deck, and there's just a lot of good enablers, so I think you can kind of, if you were to draft towards it, it's pretty easy. In fact, if I was guessing, if you just drafted like a Jund mid-range deck right now in the cube, you should be either looking to have a reanimation plan or a sort of Delirium plan to supplement what's going on and make your cards better, get more good cards for your deck later than other people would take them. And so, yeah, this Swarm Weaver is going to fit really nicely into that strategy.
Undead Sprinter is red-black for a 2/2 zombie with trample and haste, and you can cast it from your graveyard with a +1/+1 counter on it as long as a non-zombie creature died this turn. There's not quite enough sacrifice stuff to make this something I think most decks will be interested in. So I have included it to start with, but after seeing it go last a couple of drafts, I'm becoming a little skeptical.
It's pretty easy to kind of ignore a 2/2 hitting you for a bunch of turns in cube with how powerful the things are that are going on. And once a card is like getting safely ignored and its ability is it's supposed to be a good attacker, not great.
Yeah, so I don't think the Sprinter is going to get there. Zimone has been solid, though. Simic has a lot of cards that are sweet. 1 green-blue for a 1/1. And at the beginning of your end step, if a land entered the battlefield under your control and you control a prime number of lands, you make a legendary fractal with power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control. So it starts mostly on turn 3. It goes 2, 3, 5, 7, and then 11, and then probably not after that. But if you play this on turn 3, you get a Blade Splicer that in 2 turns upgrades the 3/3 to a 5/5 if you haven't gotten it killed yet, because it's legendary, so you can't have multiple, but it's a pretty good creature to like chump with if you know you're going to get the second version of it, and then eventually makes a 7/7. I think it's a pretty solid card.
Can I talk about some tricks?
Oh, yeah. Tricks and tips.
So let's say you got 4 lands in play and you got a Zimone. Play your fetch land. Do you crack that fetch land? Maybe not. Because next turn, say the 5/5 goes away, or you just attack with the 5/5, you can then crack the fetch land, and now you've got 5 lands in play, and you had a land come into play this turn, so you get either a replacement 5/5, or maybe you're giving it pseudo vigilance. Maybe next turn, you play another fetch land and you fail to find. You had a land come into play this turn, you still only control a prime number. I would not say an important part of the card is understanding how big the prime numbers are, but if you get into that spot where you have the Nissa Lotus Cobras,
yeah, you're gonna have to take out your prime number lookup table. Like, okay, do I want to end with 23 lands or 29 lands?
Yeah, keep going, man. All right,
this is starting to make me think fetch lands are good. We should draft some fetch lands.
Let's do that.
I like Zimone though. Also, you can skull clamp Zimone. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Dissection Tools. I'm going to replace Batterskull with this. I think that is a pretty easy swap, honestly. It's a 5-mana equipment, and when it enters, you manifest Dread and attach the tools. The tools give the creature +2/+2 Death Touch and Lifelink, and the equip cost is sack a creature. So I think it plays out pretty interestingly. It's also a Death Touch plus Lifelinker as opposed to Batterskull. Though Batterskull gives +4/+4, this gives +2/+2, etc. This is great with Stoneforge Mystic. And after playing with this a lot in Limited, it is pretty interesting of a decision. Do I want to sack a creature to move this? Moving a creature or moving equipment at no mana cost is powerful. Having a sack outlet, or you can use it as many times as you want, is kind of powerful. So I think Dissection Tools has something going for it.
You put it on a broadside bombardiers, and then it will really, really do a good job at killing the things because it'll pick up Death Touch.
Yeah, you do that on any creature that can deal damage. You can kind of get some extra value out of that, and really good on like a first striker, for example, or on a trampler. You put this on a big trampler, and all of a sudden, Death Touch Trample means you just get to do tons of damage to them. So I like Dissection Tools, and I've also just been feeling Batterskull's not good enough. I mean, how many times have you seen this where someone has a Stoneforge and a Batterskull both in their sideboard because they didn't pick up Cauldron? I've seen it a couple times, and it's like, yeah, I guess Batterskull Stoneforge is not what it used to be. Maybe Dissection Tools breathes new life into it. Ghost Vacuum is another one. So this is a 1-mana artifact. It taps to exile a card from a graveyard, and you pay 6 and tap and sack it, and you put all creatures exiled onto the battlefield under your control, except they're 1/1 flying spirits now. So the question is this better than Relic of Progenitus or Soul Guide Lantern? Because I don't think I want all 3 of those in at the same time. Would you cut one of those for that?
I don't really like Relic of Progenitus, so sure. I mean, the thing that this card has as a big advantage is that there's actually not many cards which just do this, like tap, exile anything of your choice from a graveyard, and you still get to keep the Ghost Vacuum around afterwards. So it's very good at keeping an opponent's graveyard under manage. The disadvantage is that you don't get to do any sort of like blow up everything ability, and there's no like cheap like buyout to draw a card. I'm sure in some games the last ability though will be pretty relevant and game winning. It certainly come up that way for me in the draft format.
I mean, if you just hit Atraxa and then sack this to put a 1/1 Atraxa into play, I think you're still pretty happy. So interested in trying out the Ghost Vacuum for sure. Blazemire Verge, this is just here to represent the whole cycle of lands. These are very strong. They don't have types, so they're not as good as Badlands, but this taps for black, and then it taps for red if you have a swamp or a mountain. Really easy way to... Basically, the way to look at these, you want it to be tap for your primary color and then tap for your splash color when you have the other types of lands. This is much better at splashing red in a black deck than splashing black in a red deck, though it does also work to do that, especially for like double colored costs. So strong lands and just, another cycle of lands that are untapped, which is pretty nice. So
yeah. There's only 5 of them. It's the 5 allied colored ones. And talk to some Zoomers, and they don't even know what allied and enemy is, because
at this point it's just irrelevant.
If you've been playing Magic only in the last 10 years, it's just been like, they just do all the color pairs the same. But back in the day, it used to be that it was like, the allied colors got just more stuff. They just did cycles that they didn't finish. And if you're curious which ones are the allied colors, if you look on the back of a Magic card, if you see 2 colors next to each other on that little like pentagram of the little mana pips, those are the allied colors.
Oh, I thought it was just random the way they put those down. So that is all the cards from Duskmourn. Adding a lot of these, almost all of them. I think like Kaito and Split Up are the 2 that I might not be adding. But we're going to try out a lot of cards, so keep an eye on the videos for that. But before we go, let's talk about Bloomburrow. All right, so for Bloomburrow, we have a little bit of data on these because a lot of these have already just been in. So Beza has been pretty solid. It's a good card. It's the thing that BK's always looking for. He's like, I just want more white cards that aren't just aggressive. He says that so often. Like, you're over at my house multiple times a week. He says it multiple times an hour. It's really weird. But
it'd be really weird if somebody was doing that.
But you agree, Beza is a white card that is good in not just aggressive decks.
Who am I to disagree with myself?
Exactly. I do think this card is cool. The other thing about Beza is you really only need to get to like the card draw ability or the 2 fish to feel like you got a pretty good deal. And if you get a treasure, it's still fine. Gaining some life is good when you need it. Like it's a nice card. Kitzel's also been cool. I'm always scared when they have this card because, Rona was like looter with upside, but the upside of Rona never materialized. No one ever flipped it. I think I literally never saw it get flipped meaningfully. Maybe it happened one time and it didn't do anything. Kitzel's ability of 2 tap to copy an instant or sorcery if it's 3 or greater power, that's pretty real. Like if they untap and they're like fatal push your thing, cast preordain, copy preordain, like that could just happen and sounds pretty devastating. Some might argue you should preordain, copy fatal push, but I would rather lose than
I
do
was
that.
thinking that you would think that the upside is that you get to preordain a second time rather than 2 fatal pushes.
Yeah, well. Mockingbird is actually not in, but I do want to try it because the powerful part about this card is it can copy their 1-drop. So on the draw, you can copy a bird or a Ragavan or a Mother of Runes. That sounds kind of interesting. Also, flying Ragavan. You like that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, Mockingbird seems sweet. I think this one's worth considering.
Yeah, it's a weird one. It takes a minute to read it because like you can spend 0 on X. It's not 1-drops cost 1 on the X. It's X -1 in a lot of ways.
Darkstar Augur. This is currently in, and I kind of don't like it. So I was just putting there as posterity. This, I believe, is like replacement level. You could have this in the cube. Sometimes people will cast it. Mostly, I don't think this card is good enough. So
yeah, it's pretty tough to spend 4 mana, and then at that point, you're just getting a 3 mana Bob.
Feed the Cycle is not in right now, but you suggested it today. So it's basically one black to kill a creature or planeswalker. But if you have 3 cards in your graveyard or have a food, there are some cards that make it, you can shave a black off the cost. And killing any creature or planeswalker is pretty nice. So this card could do something.
It's cute when you forge in response to their reanimation spell.
Yes, that's a good way to do things. Or shrink a Tarmogoyf. Oh, thank you. The mic's here, actually.
Oh, wow.
Iridescent Vine Lasher is in right now, and I think is a little too weak. Just doesn't do quite enough. Thought Stalker Warlock. On LR once, I made the mistake of saying I didn't think this card was that good, and then I got thoroughly trounced because it is a great card in Limited.
Yeah.
Not quite good enough for Cube, I don't think. I have it in right now, and it's just not quite delivered.
It's nice to hear you own your L's.
Yeah, well, I got so many. I got to, kind of own up to some of them. Emberheart Challenger is, you should have seen the deck I just went 3-3 with. 2 Ghostly Dancers in it. Unbelievable.
Where am I?
You're in the Office of Justification and Bargaining is where you are. Emberheart Challenger is fine. It's got haste. It's got prowess. If you target it, you get to do things. This is just going to get removed for the new cards from Duskmourn. Cash grab. All right, make your argument. You want this card in.
It does so much. It's like a draw for 2, assuming you care about the cards that are in your graveyard. Mill 4, you can get a permanent from them, so we're getting any of the types. So it's better than Grizzly Salvage in that you can get enchantments and artifacts and planeswalkers off of it. The squirrel part is nonsense, but yeah. And
is there a single squirrel in the cube? I don't know if there is.
I don't think so. But you just get to, if your deck is well built for Delirium, this is a 2 mana turn on Delirium. You only get the cards back from among the ones you milled. But I've seen this consistently be really great at making cards like Shifting Woodlands and Omnivorous Flytrap be really good in Modern. And so I'm excited to see what it can do in Cube.
All right, well, we'll try it. We'll see how good it is. Innkeeper's Talent. This is like a Luminarch Aspirant, but instead of a 1/1, you get this class that can like give your permanents hex or ward 1 as long as they have counters and doubles the number of permanents or counters you put on a permanent or player. So kind of cute with Plainswalkers if you have the last mode leveled up and you play a Plainswalker and enters with twice the loyalty. So that I think might get me to put it in because it's like the 2 mana put a counter on every turn part is pretty strong if you're attacking. Like if you play this on 2 and then play Sentinel on 3, Questing Beast on 4, you got some relevant stats on your creatures that want to survive combat. And then you get that last part where sometimes you're like Nissa -7 right away or whatever. So
yeah, it's a good recipe for a green card in Cube in that you can spend 2 then 3 mana and that level 2 mode is a lot more annoying to play against than it first looks. The Ward 1 just so much like Ward 1 is one of those things where it's just going to keep happening, and the more it happens, the more it's taxing your opponent in ways that are annoying. And then, yeah, anytime you just put a card in, like a Bristly Bill is a great example in a green deck where it's just like, yeah, I have Fanatic of Ronus, I have Gaia's Cradle, I have Nissa who shakes the world. And having a way to just spend a bunch of mana in the late game to do something powerful is going to come up and be helpful.
Yeah, you sold me. And Keeper's Talent, worth trying. Keen-Eyed Curator is currently in as a replacement for Scavenging Ooze. It's harder to cast, but easier to use, and just eventually you get a 7/7 trample instead of however big the ooze is. I'd say these are comparable. I haven't found this card to be awesome, but it's fine.
Yeah, the part that kind of pushes it a little over the edge for me is that trample ability, and it makes it into like a real legitimate thing where, okay, I spent a bunch of work to fill out my yard and get some cards out of your yard, and the fact that a pretty common play pattern with this is that you will end up exiling mostly from your opponent's yard, and then you'll be like, oh, you don't have you have enchantment, land, and creature or whatever, and I got those 3. Oh, I have an artifact, I have a sorcery, and you use that to pick up the rest.
Yeah, and once it's a 7/7, it's a pretty big game. Paw Patch Formation is a little bit suspect. So it kills an enchantment, it draws a card, makes a food, or kills a creature with flying. So it's doesn't hit artifacts is the big miss here, but is more flexible outside of that.
Yeah, my guess is that unlike Pick Your Poison, this probably doesn't get there by not killing artifacts, but it's been a pretty valuable card in powerful formats like Modern and Pioneer, where it can just hit a lot of card types that are hard for green to always hit with just one card. So yeah, you got to respect it, but it probably won't be quite good enough for the most powerful cubes.
You have to respect it, but you absolutely do not have to add it. Paw Patch Recruit, it's in the current Moto cube. It's not currently in my list, I don't think, and I thought it's okay. It's a cheap, aggressive creature, but it's in a color, like if this was white, I think this card would be awesome. The problem is a lot of the green decks don't really want a 1-mana 2/1 or 3 mana for a 2/1 plus a 1/1 so much.
Yeah, you like it a lot when you have Gaia's Cradle and you're trying to attack, you have threats that are important to kill, and it's one of those cards where it's probably a little bit below rate in most of your games, but once in a while it'll have a game where it's like, how did this 1-drop just completely dominate what my opponent is doing? And like, you know, your opponent trying to pick off your board with a Fury or a Walking Ballista goes very badly when you have a Paw Patch Recruit.
Yeah, it's definitely got some matchups, so it's okay. And it's another card that's good with Cradle and Skull Clamp, which is cool. Definitely have to add Fountain Port. I don't really know how I missed this one. This card has just been awesome and constructed. I have to imagine it's going to be at least decent in cube. It's a colorless land, but getting to make 1/1 fishes or treasure tokens, then draw cards, it just gives you a lot to do with extra mana. And in decks that naturally make tokens, it's also kind of nice that can, like a white deck that a Staff of the Storyteller, I have to imagine Fountain Port would be solid there.
Oh, that sounds lovely. Yep, does a lot for, you know, just a colorless utility land. It's been a while since we've had one that was good enough for cube.
All right, so that is kind of our review of the Duskmourn cards, plus of course kind of a retrospective on Bloomburrow, plus some new cards which I kind of missed in the midst of the 64 season, the Cube Worlds and all that. I wasn't doing a lot of updating because no one was drafting my Cube. Everyone was playing the events online. Now we're back at it, drafting the Cube many times a week. So I'm excited to try out these new cards, see what sticks and what doesn't. If you've got suggestions for cards, really from any set, especially sets like there's a lot of weird supplemental sets that I don't really know about, I'm always happy to hear them. Put them in the comments. I'll see them. And also, I know that the Fallout set is coming to Magic Online, so we're going to probably add a couple of cards from that set, too. There's some kind of cool ones. So that'll do it for today. As always, thanks for hanging out, BK. And you know what? We'll be back tomorrow with some more drafts. We'll see you then. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. It helps out the channel, and you won't miss a single draft.